Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God.
We are again talking about ordinances. And I just want to do a little recap about what we went through last week and talk a little bit about functional mode of baptism prior to going on to threefold communion. What we talked about last week was a little bit of history of how we got to the place that we're at, both in the fellowship and in the broader church. And then we talked about where we get the command in Matthew 28:19 and 20, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, immersing them repeatedly or forcefully in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all the things that I've commanded you, and behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. And we talked about how if we translate the word baptizo properly, it would mean immerse, and if we dig deep into the Greek grammar, we see that baptizo is a frequentative verb, meaning that it has multiple physical actions from it, and so. And with that, based upon that, and the verbiage of verse 19, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, that we conclude that the teaching of Jesus was trine immersion. We did a little bit of history last week and saw that trine immersion was the mode of the early church, as pictured in the Didache and in a number of other places. And is still the mode in a number of churches, even churches that sprinkle or pour. They do so with three separate actions and so forth. So you've got that. Those of you that weren't here, you've got it in the text of your handout. If you need to go over that again, we can. But I want to talk a little bit about the mode, the functional, the physical mode. And so for that, I've got some pictures. Yay, Sue! Some pictures there of our baptism that we have done recently. There's Chuck's mom. She was perhaps the toughest. She didn't want to get under the water, and you can't see it, but I'm straining to push her head under. She is resisting, and I'm just like jumping up and down on her, trying to get her head under the water. She was not going. I'm not sure. I think her hand is free, but she was, I'm telling you, she was tough. Butch and Catherine and Michelle, that is your names, right? Everybody has a doppelganger.
Yeah, that guy does have gray hair. Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, I noticed it as well, but I didn't. Thank you. You too.
I think that's Butch. See, he's trying to pull me under. See the hand here? I'm going, you're going.
Holding penalty.
Yeah. There's Michelle. Always have to have a discussion first. Catherine getting dunked. Betty coming into the pool. Oh, I get Betty again. And see how I'm straining? Yeah, it's just like, and Chris. There's a good action shot coming up out of the water. Yeah. See, there you go. That's how you get a guy down. think that's Stanley. There's Al. Al was a challenge. Al was a challenge because Al has a prosthetic left leg. Well, Al had a prosthetic left leg. And the one that he put on was the one that he called his water leg, but it floated. And so when he was in the water, and I had to actually stand on his foot. You can almost see it there where I'm standing on his foot, on his prosthetic foot, to keep it from floating. That was a struggle. That was a struggle. I think I know those two. I like the spiked look in your hair. Okay. So you get the picture here. What we're talking about is we stand. Where's one where I've got Chris there? We stand in the water, and I like to have a little bit of time of testimony of the person that's being baptized to answer some questions, particularly questions like how they know they're saved and what that means and those kinds of things, and then to make a verbal assent that they are children of the King, and that they're desirous of submitting to his command to be baptized. And then you see there we usually have a cloth if you want to cover your nose. I think that is more like waterboarding, so I'm not sure why anybody would want to do it that way. But after they've agreed and said yes, that they are saved and they know why and so forth, then it is a function of a deep breath and pushing under the water, or in the case of Betty, slamming underwater because she wouldn't go. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. And then coming up for a breath and doing it again, and coming up for a breath and doing it again. And depending on how I feel, how long I keep you down. Yeah, sometimes it'll be longer than others, and yeah. What's that? That's right. That's right. You know, I recognize that you can go 4 minutes without brain damage, so we're in good shape. You know. Whoa. That's when it's bad. Don't. Yeah. No. Matt's doing you, so, you know, that's between you and him, okay? and it's that simple. I mean, it's not a complex deal. I think it's a beautiful act to reflect on our submission to the Lord and our desire to be part of the family. Both the symbolism of being immersed into the family of God and being obedient to God. You know, the symbolism of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit being involved in our salvation is shown by the repetitive dunkings, which, by the way, is why we were called dunkers. Any questions you might have on that? It seems pretty straightforward. I haven't lost a one yet. Yeah, getting up and down, and that for the day we did this one, you know, that was difficult for a lot of people. We had 10 that we were baptizing that day, and it was difficult. But I think it was the most glorious day to baptize, because we had a tropical storm off the coast, and we'd had rain, and at the end of church, the discussion was, well, we're going to go through with it. It was still raining. And we said, well, let's go over to the house and let's see what happens. And as soon as everybody got there and got ready to get in the pool, it stopped raining and the sun came out. And we baptized the 10 people. The last person came out and poof, the rain came back. It was just like God opened up the skies for us. It was beautiful. Yeah, it was cool. Exactly. So, yeah, I just love that one. No, I'm struggling. Yeah, she doesn't like going underwater, does she? Okay. So that's the physical action. And if I have to stand on your feet, I will. Okay. Let's move on to threefold communion. The second ordinance practiced in most churches is communion. The most common application of communion is simply in the giving of the bread and the cup, sometimes referred to as the Eucharist. Churches in the Brethren tradition practice the Eucharist as part of a much larger service and teaching we commonly refer to as threefold communion. It involves three separate portions of the service. You know, we're Trinitarians, you could say, because we do things in threes. The parts of the service are foot washing, love feast, and the Eucharist. And so we'll discuss each of those in separate fashion. Let me get my Bible to the right passage here. Hello. John 13 is where we're going to spend some time. John chapter 13. Foot washing. It is interesting if you do a church history or a modern church history course. It's interesting the number of churches that still practice some form of church of foot washing on some level in the church. For as long as I was able to see in church records, the Pope on Maundy Thursday, which is the day before Good Friday, washes feet. Typically, the previous popes did it of cardinals, select cardinals. The current pope does it of poor folks in a shelter or wherever. He goes into the shelter and selects a few and washes their feet. But they don't do it as a cohesive part of a service, and so the elements are distorted in what they teach. By the way, they're sacramental, so they believe that the Pope is giving some grace when he washes those feet. And of course, we saw last week that we're ordinantal, not sacramental, and no grace is given. In John chapter 13, we have the account of Jesus eating the Passover meal with his disciples, or a meal before the Passover. There's a lot of debate, and we don't need to get deep into that, but whether or not it was actually the Passover there is some debate. A lot of scholars believe that Friday would have been the proper Passover day and would have been the day for the meal. So this had to be a meal prior to the Passover. But and then there are others that argue no, this actually was the Passover, even if it was a day early. Well, I'm not going to argue that it was the Passover even if it was a day early, because that would have been in violation of the law. Because the law says you do Passover meal on a certain day. And so which day that is up to debate. But we treat it as though it were a Passover. It has the same foods as if it were a Passover. And the passage also includes Jesus washing the feet of the, but washing the feet of the disciples during the meal. I read this like 5 times before I printed it. Yeah, I missed that one. But there are some facts that we need to recognize from the text. That's not the right one. In your Bibles, go to John chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. John chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God, and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water in a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. So, the first thing you need to see there, it is during supper. Some Greek scholars argue that the grammar leads us to believe it was before supper. I can't find anybody that validates what those guys say. And it doesn't look like it to me when I look at the words. It looks like it's during supper. In other words, they're seated around they're reclining around the triclinium table, and they're eating their foods and having the discussions about who's going to win the race that day, or who's going to win the football game that day, or whatever they're discussing. And in the middle of that chaos of 12, 13 men sitting and eating, Jesus gets up and begins to wash feet. It's not before, and it's not after, it's during. It seems like it places some emphasis on the meal itself, like that's part of what's going on. Jesus himself poured water into a basin and himself washed the feet of the disciples. Those who are opposed to foot washing in the church argue that he was being a good host. That was a custom of the day that you washed feet. Now let me just debunk that theory completely. The custom of the day was that the host provided water at the door or near the front door, and that he either provided a slave or a woman or a child to do it, or the people did it themselves. It was never done by the host, and it was never done by the rabbi. Because you remember a few years ago when George W. Was still president, he had a shoe thrown at him. He was in the Middle East, and there was a public outcry because of the shame of that. The foot, even in the ancient Near East, the bottom of the foot particularly, was the dirtiest part of the body, and it contracted all the dirt from wherever you went. A Jew leaving Gentile country had to knock the dirt off of their feet when they crossed the border so they didn't take dirt from the other country in and so forth. So when you washed feet, especially someone else's, you got ceremonially unclean. The rabbi was never going to do that. So to think that Jesus was just being a good host and that he would do that, even if it was at the door, he wouldn't have done it. But certainly not at the meal. What was one of the chief complaints that the Pharisees had about Jesus? He didn't wash hands properly. His disciples didn't wash their hands properly. They ate without washing their hands. Oh, can you believe that? So to think that he would get up from a meal and go and wash feet during the meal, no. There's just no legitimacy to that argument. It just can't happen that way, because for a number of reasons. Ceremonially unclean. As the rabbi, he wouldn't have done it anyway. The host does it at the door, not at the table. Remember, this is the upper room. They came through the courtyard gate, they came through the front door, and those were places where foot washing occurred. Not in the upper room, and not during the meal. So it's just not part of the custom. Without bathtubs or showers in the house, people would go to the would go to the community bath and would then they'd get all clean and they'd walk home. Their feet would get dirty, and so they'd wash feet. Plus, it was a comforting thing, long travel, to wash feet. But that's not what was going on here. It's not part of the ancient Near East custom offered to guests in a home. It is not performed by the host, and it is not performed by the rabbi. If Jesus was simply continuing the ancient Near East custom, then his question in John chapter 13, verse 12 makes no sense. Jump over to verse 12. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to... Okay, go to John chapter 13, verse 12. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments, he resumed his place and said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you?" If this was just keeping with the ancient Near East custom of washing feet, why would he ask that question? Do you understand what I've just done? I just performed the custom of washing your feet? Of course not. It makes no sense for Jesus to ask that question if he was just complying with the normal custom. Or they're all pretty stupid. Take your pick. You know, the disciples are stupid, or there's something else going on here. He was teaching them something that he told them that they should also do. Look down at verse 14. Chapter 13, verse 14. If I then, your Lord and... I remembered I had this one up there. If I then, your Lord and teacher, or Lord and master, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. That's about as clear a command as I can find in Scripture, other than things like thou shalt not murder. I mean, that's pretty clear. If I did it, if I, your Lord and master, did it, you also ought to wash one another's feet. Now, he wasn't saying you also ought to be a good host and provide comfort at the door. He's saying you also ought to wash one another's feet, recognizing their role as rabbis in the world after he ascends into heaven and the church begins. So he's establishing something that they were to do. Okay? Jesus said, I did something different. And since I did it, you also ought to do it as well. Now, I recognize that there are a lot of great preachers out there that don't get this right. And I'm just going to call it like I see it. They get it wrong, including one of my heroes, Dr. John MacArthur. He says that it teaches a pattern of humility. Well, it is humbling to get down on your hands and knees in front of somebody and wash their stinky feet. But that's not what Jesus was doing. Because their feet were already clean because they got the foot washing of the ancient Near East custom at the door. And then they were sitting at the table or reclining around the table when he did something new. He started something new. Something that they didn't understand then, but after they would, as he told them. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, the Apostle Paul gives some instructions to young Pastor Timothy concerning the qualifications of widows. One of these qualifications is she washed the saints' feet. Would the Apostle Paul be using such a cryptic way of saying that she was humble? No, I think he probably would have said that she was humble, if that's what he meant. No, he asked the question. Did she wash the saints' feet? If she wants to be considered a widow and get charity from the church, she has to be participant in the church functions. She has to be participant in the ordinance of the church. And that she washed the saints' feet.
So you would say, I mean, I don't know, I guess the way I look at it, it's safe to say that there is the element of humility embedded in there. It's
yes. Right. Yeah. Jesus is not teaching humility when he gets down on his hands and feet and he washes their feet. On his hands and knees and he washes their feet. He's not saying to be humble. He's saying to do what I did. And then the Apostle Paul says to Timothy, if you want a woman to be on that role of widows, did she go through the ordinances of the church? Did she wash the saints' feet? Is it humbling to do that? Absolutely, but that's not what's being taught. And we'll talk about what communion teaches in just a bit. Well, right now. What theological truth is symbolized by foot washing is the most logical question that you would ask at this point. I'll deal with it a little bit here, and then we'll move on to in more depth in a little bit. Jesus said to Peter when Peter objected. You remember the scene? They're all reclining around the table. Jesus gets up, takes off his outer garment, puts a towel around him, and pours some water in a basin, and then he goes foot to foot to foot to foot. And he gets to Peter. And Peter said, no, you're not going to wash my feet. He puts two words together that can't ever go together. No, Lord. He said, no, Lord, you can't. You're God, you're my master, but no, you can't do that. And Jesus said, look, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. So Jesus goes on and washes his feet. The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. Jesus begins setting the stage for the complete teaching of threefold communion. Jesus is talking to men, with the exception of Judas, who were clean, who had been redeemed through faith in God to save them. Not yet understanding that Jesus would die on the cross. They still, he was going to die on the cross the next day. They still didn't get the picture yet.
Did he wash Judas's feet?
Yeah. Yeah. He washed all of them, all 12.
All
24 feet. I was just going to... That we always gave Al a hard time when it came to communion. For him, it's truly foot washing, not feet washing. They didn't understand yet that Jesus would die for them the next day, but they trusted God to save them. God viewed them with the imputed righteousness of Jesus, perfectly clean and white. But the reality is that even though we have Jesus' righteousness imputed to our accounts, we still sin. So what's the picture? The picture is of going to the communal bath and getting clean and getting your feet dirty going home so that you just have to wash your feet when you get home. The picture is of our being righteous, have the righteousness of Jesus imputed to our account, God looking at us as righteous, and then we go and sin. And we need to have a daily cleansing from that sin because we still have the sin nature. So we have that picture of that daily cleansing, that present cleansing. Now let's move on to the love feast. Oh, here's some pictures of foot washing. Forgot I put those in. From the movie The Passion. Love feast. It was during the meal. It was not before and it was not after. It was during the meal that Jesus rose to wash the disciples' feet. It was during the same meal that Jesus offered the bread and the cup, as we'll look at in a little bit. It is clear that the symbolism of actions of Jesus that night, the night that he was betrayed, includes the love feast, or what is often called the Lord's Supper. And like I mentioned earlier, you can imagine that scene. I don't know all that they talked about, but we know that there were discussions before some of the meals about the right place to sit because of the hierarchy of the seating positions, and how even some of the disciples had family members come and argue with Jesus, saying, "I think he needs a better position. He needs to be sitting closer to Jesus," and so forth. So they had this rivalry going on. You can imagine that they had conversations about the topic of the day in Jerusalem, and that they had all these kinds of discussions, maybe even theological discussions. Well, Jesus said this, but I think he meant that. You can see how that would happen. Whether the meal was the Passover or not is open to debate, as I said earlier, and whether it was or wasn't doesn't really alter the teaching of threefold communion. It was a meal shared together by those who have joined together in following Jesus. They were all Jesus' disciples. They were gathered in the upper room, and they had this meal together. Those who do not practice the love feast argue that a reference in the text to the meal was simply a reference to the bread used by Jesus in the Eucharist. That's missing the entirety of the stage set by the gospel writers. Jesus sends someone ahead to prepare the meal. He doesn't send them ahead to get a couple of little wafers. Little wafers are inadequate symbols of what Jesus was using and doing. The ones in the Catholic Church taste good, but they're not proper symbols. So they were all gathered together. They were sitting around the table. He had washed their feet at the table. There's just so much information given in the Gospels to indicate that a real meal was going on that it does it injustice to say that it wasn't. And then when you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and you see Jesus correcting the Corinthians for their abuse of the meal, it is clear it is truly a meal. The love feast or the Lord's Supper symbolizes a yet future event we call the marriage supper of the Lamb. In John's writing of the book of Revelation, we find the yet future marriage supper of the Lamb in chapter 19, verse 7. Oh, here's a this is the triclinium setup. This was actually at Focus Retreat last year. Pastor Randy had it set up. Yeah. I have pictures from ours last time, but I couldn't find it. And so I just had to go with these pictures. Now, notice that this is a table on the ground. That's typically how they ate. They ate on the table, laying on their side, with the right hand free to eat. And when we go through that in a couple of weeks, I'll explain that gives us information of how we know who was where, or at least some of who was where. Anyway, you notice on the table, I know it's kind of dark, but you can see the different bowls of vegetables and grains and sop and bread and so forth. So they were around a table much like this. And we will as well in here. We'll have it set up. We won't be laying on the ground because some of us wouldn't get up off the ground. I recognize that. So we'll sit in chairs. They didn't. And it's still that way in the Mideast in a lot of places today. They don't use tables and chairs. They just eat on the floor. So, Revelation 19:7. Let us rejoice and exalt and give him glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted to her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. Here's a good reason why you want to have lots of righteous deeds. Because if your robe is going to be made up based upon the number of righteous deeds, some are wearing bikinis. And trust me, you want me to have a big robe, not a bikini. So you want me to have lots of righteous deeds so that I have a big flowing robe. Yes. And stop that. And the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. So we have this picture, the marriage supper of the Lamb that occurs after the rapture in heaven, when we're sitting down as the bride of Christ. That is, all of those that have been redeemed from Pentecost until the rapture. We sit down together at a big table celebrating the culmination of our salvation. Future event, glorification, when our bodies are translated, when we're into that, we no longer have the cough, and we have that glorified, eternal, immortal body. When we sit with God at the marriage supper of the Lamb. That's future aspect. So, foot washing is present, marriage supper of the Lamb, love feast, future aspect of our salvation. It's the culmination of salvation process which began by the call of God before the foundation of the world and was carried out by Jesus on the cross to provide us eternal life. Mortal life is over, and we're now in eternity with the Lord. We still have the millennial kingdom to go through, but we're in our new, immortal, glorified bodies. The marriage supper of the Lamb. We go from the marriage supper of the Lamb to the Eucharist. The Eucharist, or bread in the cup, is the final part of the threefold communion. As was said earlier, it is part of the communion that is practiced by most churches that do not practice foot washing and the love feast. Most Baptist churches will have the bread in the cup. Most churches, most Protestant churches at least, and even the liturgical churches do bread and cup. But they miss so much of the teaching of communion by just doing bread and cup and not doing the love feast and the foot washing. So, because they believe that was part of the command to do it every week. There is no timing part of the command that we can see. Some brethren churches do a threefold communion 4 times a year. Some do it twice a year. Some do it once a year. Some do it whenever they want to. Some churches do bread and cup every service. I was pretty small in the Catholic Church when they stopped giving any drink as part of communion, except for the priest. I remember at my first communion, that's a special ceremony. You have to dress up and stuff. We actually got some. My mom told me it was wine. I'm sure it was grape juice as part of the ceremony. But if you watch now a Catholic service, if you watch the Mass for the Supreme Court Justice, it was just bread given. The wine was only for the officiants of the service, and I think that distorts the message as well.
Yeah, that's just not right.
That's right. They should have wine too, right?
Everybody ought to
Right.
get one drink.
Yeah.
How widespread is that in the Catholic Church?
That wine is just for the officiants. No, nobody gets wine except the officiants.
So in your eyes, does that mean that only the leadership is eligible for salvation, since that's supposed to represent?
Well, it is a doctrinal problem for them that only the people that are the officiants of the service get the wine. Yeah, it's not that good tasting anyway. I've stolen some and it's not that good.
Like, how long has that been? Yes.
Your road just got shorter.
No, I don't think so. I like the bread though. The bread, the little wafers, they tasted good. The wine, not so much. But I'm not a wine fan anyway. So, it for a long time. I remember as a kid, in the 60s, everyone getting a drink, but not every Sunday. So maybe that was only on special occasions. But now you never see it. Anybody except the officiants. Ann? Yeah, that everyone got the wine?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. My grandfather's funeral, they did it.
Yeah.
I mean, they wipe off the
Mhm.
glass every time.
Yeah.
It's a drink.
But that's good when you're at a wedding or something like that.
Yeah, it might be special occasions. Yeah, I don't know. It was during the meal in which Jesus washed the disciples' feet that he also instituted the bread and the cup as a memorial. Matthew, Mark, and Luke have recorded instituting of the bread and the cup. Jesus utilized customary items found at the table for the meal. Get the picture of what's going on. Jesus is reclined at the table, and during the meal, as you'll see when we have our meal together and we use the same utensils and the same foods, roughly the same foods, you tear a piece of bread and you dip it in the sop, or you take an herb and you dip it in something. There's a couple of different things to dip in. That Jesus used those common things that were there at the table. And he took a piece of bread. You can imagine that it was unleavened bread because it was for the Passover. And so, we use flat bread. And he tore a piece, he held it up and he prayed and he thanked God for it. And then he tore it and ate that and gave it to the others. And then for the wine, he took his cup of wine and unlike some churches that say it was just grape juice, it was actually wine because they needed to drink wine because the water would kill you. And so you needed to have something with alcohol in it to prevent the bugs from getting you. The argument that it's not wine, that there's no alcohol in it, just bears no semblance of reality. He took his cup of wine, whether it was a nice chalice or what, probably it was made out of wood. And it was crude, I suppose. And he took that wine, he thanked God for it, and he then drank from it and gave it to the others. And he gave some symbolism. He said, "This is my body, which is sacrificed for you. The wine represents my blood, which will be shed for you." Now get the confusion of the disciples. This is the day before he's arrested and tried, and they don't yet understand he's actually going to die. And so he's saying, look, I'm sacrificing my body, I'm going to shed my blood. But he also said, I get it, you don't understand, you won't now, but you will eventually. And so after he's dead, after he's raised, after he's ascended, they begin putting pieces together. And they see what was going on in that service. The bread and the cup represent that past action, that sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. So we have past, present, and future aspects of our salvation represented in the threefold communion. The past action of Jesus on the cross, the present action represented by the foot washing of our daily cleansing. The future action of the marriage supper of the Lamb, where we all join together and celebrate our glorified bodies. Celebrate being with Him, being for eternity now immortal with Him. That's the symbolism of threefold communion. If you only do bread and cup, you're only looking at Jesus on the cross. You're not thinking about your daily cleansing. You're not thinking about that future glorification. It's just Jesus on the cross. That's one of my chief complaints with a crucifix. It's a beautiful picture of Jesus on the cross, but they never show the cross empty. I like the cross empty because He didn't stay there. He went into the grave and He came out of the grave alive. There's more than just Jesus on the cross to your salvation. Your salvation is still ongoing. Paul says, work out your salvation. That is, work through your salvation. It is an ongoing process that is only completed when we're glorified at the rapture, when our bodies are changed. And so, threefold communion illustrates all three aspects of our salvation. Baptism illustrates all three members of the triune Godhead that brought you to salvation, that made salvation possible, and communion illustrates the past, present, and future aspects of that same salvation. They are beautiful pictures of what God has done. Questions? We have threefold communion coming up, Palm Sunday, which is March 20. And we have baptism coming up 2 weeks from today, right? Is that what we said? That's what we're planning on? 2 weeks from today. Yes? 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 2 weeks from today. So pray that it's sunny and warm so the pool warms up. 13th of March. So that the pool warms up. We've got a cover on it. We got the solar going. And I got to run in maximum time during the day so that it warms up. I've got a wetsuit, you guys, I'm sorry. So the plan is for the baptism, we will have regular services here, and then we'll all dump out of here quickly and go over to our house. We have meal, yes? Is that what we're talking about? No? Yes? That's why I'm asking. Yet to be determined. Okay. And then, huh?
Good answer.
Depends on how much beating I take next. And then we'll go through the baptismal ceremony, and that'll be a cool time. Just about everybody here has gone through it, so it's pretty cool. Any questions? You have your handouts, so if I misspoke or if you misunderstood, refer back to the handout, and also you can ask at any time, and I'll be glad to talk about the subject. I think it is a cool picture. The command by Jesus to do these things, because they're ordinantal, because they're ordinances, a physical action which teaches a spiritual truth. I think they're beautiful. I think they teach a wonderful thing that we otherwise wouldn't know.
Is the threefold communion going to be like our last one?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We have some different arrangement we have to do in order to accommodate, but yes, we'll have the, as near as we can replicate the Passover Seder foods with the bitter herbs and the other herbs and the various sops, and I forget what the appley stuff is, but all that stuff. And we have our little lamps, and that'll be cool. But there's a lot of teaching that we can do when we're in a triclinium fashion so we can understand better what the disciples were going through. Okay. Father, we love you, and we are so grateful for the teaching of in your word of the pictures, of the symbols that you have given us. We recognize that we are finite beings, and we need to have pictures to illustrate your truth. And so the picture of triune immersion, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit being involved in our salvation. What a picture that is. The triune nature of our communion service, the past, present, and future aspects of our salvation as they're taught in the communion service. We are so grateful for that. Thank you that you saved us and that you continuously cleanse us and that someday you'll glorify us. That's a beautiful picture. We look forward to studying your word some more and to worshiping you in song and in fellowship. And we thank you for all that you do for us and for loving us, even when we're unlovable. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.